We're under
Department is
technology.
Technology Services, and Dave DeVore is the Interim Director of Technology Services. He is not feeling well, but he has agreed, and Chair Smith and I have talked, to present on Zoom. So this is the only one we're allowing on Zoom.
Okay.
But Dave DeVore, the Interim Director of Technology Services, will present the Technology Services Department via Zoom. So Dave, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Hope you feel better soon. Please go ahead with your presentation, and then, of course, call out the page numbers you are referring to in the book. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the commission and to the board, the budget to committee meetings. I do appreciate you letting me do it by Zoom. You definitely do not want me there today, so I do appreciate it. I'll have a pleasure to be doing the budget overview for the Technology Services Department. I'll try to run through it fairly quick. I know I'm not as fast as Dan Johnson could be, but we'll give our best shot. A little perspective, TS has wide diverse services that we deliver. Pretty much all of the technology for the county. We do partner with like the West and CCOM and Sheriff for some specialty services that they are much better set up to provide, but it does provide a good arrangement with our partnerships with the departments in providing almost all the technology that the county needs, from phones to desktops to software to licensing, you name it. This last year I had a few challenges. Now as we're coming out of COVID, hopefully, I'm bearing witness to, that we're moving into a much more mobile and teleworking environment. It's more the standard than the exception now. A lot more security. We are now a full hybrid environment where we're half cloud, half on premise with our services, which is another challenge. And of course, all the vendors are changing their technology offerings all the time. So we're trying to keep up with all that and still maintain an efficient service for the county. That being said, with all the different types of services we also have a diverse revenue sources. We have indirect allocation for internal services. We have what used to be called non-departmental, but is now more of an allocation to the general fund for some of our services. We have direct bill for those services that departments decide they want to have, like they want a new cell phone or they want us to do moves for them or wiring. We have a grant this year that we will be covering, some other services, and of course allocation, which is based mostly on utilization metrics, so departments have the ability to actually track and determine what the best business use of their technology dollars are. So given that, I'd like to jump in to section 20, slide 5, which is the department summary by fund. Historically, we have two funds that are our primary funds, 747, which is most of our technology services, and 602, which is our Clackamas Broadband Express. This year, we're actually very fortunate to be part of ARPA, so we can do even more with our CBX. So we also have a third fund this year that we'll be covering, 230, for some ARPA funds that we were receiving. We have 4 lines of businesses that pretty much divide up our services based on the type of technology and the service they have, and also realign with a little the revenue, which allows us to then actually try to have metrics tied for our performance Clackamas measurements. We have 9 programs, which are on slide 5 here. I won't go into great detail because we'll cover them in more detail when we get into the individual fund levels. At the top level, though, excuse me, I will mention that we had 1 reduction in our FTE this year. We went from 58 total people to 57. We had a vacancy that we were able to cut to help bring down some of the cost. The other part I will mention here is you'll see that we have for the first year over on the right-hand side, general fund support and budget for $3.8 million. That was what used to be called non-departmental. So that's been shifted this year into that section for the budget. The rest of the details here I'll get into, and when we get into the individual funds, it's a little bit difficult to see where our performance is right now with the ARPA and our CBX rolled into this level. So as we move into the next slides, we'll get into more detail. If we can go to section 20, slide 7, please. That's the summary of revenue and expenses for all of technology services. Again, this is with all the funds rolled together. So we'll get into a little more detail in the section here. But I would like to point out that you'll notice excuse me, our beginning balance has gone down this year. That's mostly due to, and we'll get into more detail that, how we do our reserves from year to year for large capital and non-capital expenses as we build up reserves to do large expenditures. Basically, we don't want to have a practice of coming back to the budget committee and saying, oh, we want to buy $500,000 worth of network gear this year. We want to plan that into our long-term budget plans. So we project out what it takes to replace capital and to expand for the county and what that requires each year to build up as reserves. And we roll those each year in the fund balance until we actually expend them. This last 2 years, we have a large amount of applications and infrastructure that was replaced that we're finally getting completed with. So that impacted our beginning balance, which we'll cover in a few minutes here. You also will notice that for 2023, our proposed budget for federal, state, local, and other donations went from 2.5 million down to 35,000. That's because our ARPA funding for this year was 2.5 million. And that's to get our phase one of CBX project going forward to add more connectivity in the county. We have phase 2 and 3 that are being started up here soon. It's projected for another 7.6 million. That will be future funding as the ARPA funds are available. So right now the money for the from the 2.5 down to 35,000 was because we don't have any additional ARPA funding identified yet. The other thing you'll notice in here that is that our charges, fines, fees, and assessments, which is basically our allocation, went from 18 million down to 15 million. That's basically because what used to be what we called allocated non-departmental, which is the general fund, is now identified down to general fund support. So it's basically shifting from one category to another. We'll also cover in a little bit more detail here soon. You'll notice that we had reductions in our materials and services and capital outlay. I'd like to move that discussion into the individual fund level, which will make a lot more sense if that's okay. So proceeding with that, excuse me for my voice, I'm losing there a little bit. Section 20, page 8 is our main fund, 747, which is most of technology services. The big thing you'll notice is overall we've reduced a little bit. We tried to cut as much as we could. We kept our general fund pretty much flat for use. Our allocations overall went up slightly, but the per rate went down, mainly because we've seen enormous increases in utilization. Good examples, our PC count went up by over 10% this last year. Cell phone counts went way up. Everything else has gone way up as people are using more and more services. So that allows us to be per unit cheaper, but overall costs still go up a little bit, supporting licensing and cost. Beginning balance is when you'll notice it went down quite a bit. Again, that's because we've been saving up to replace our network gear this last year and a large amount of our servers. It's kind of the perfect storm analogy. We tried to do the biometric where we tried to do network over a couple of years, then servers, then something else. Well, everything kind of hit this last 2 years. So we replaced most of our server farm, all of our network, and also upgraded our virtual services licensing, which basically allows us to operate like a cloud. Black County actually is much like a cloud in that we integrate with other services and cloud services, much like they do now. So all of that hit this last year, but now as we start paying it off and we start building that reserve again, our fund balance went way down, and we'll start building that up over the next few years. The other thing you've noticed, again, is in years where we moved our assessments and allocation down from allocation and from 16,000 down to 13,000, with the 16 million down to 13 million. We moved the 3.8 million down into general fund. So that's just that breakout in those two categories. Overall, we've pretty much reduced across the board as far as our revenue, as we've tried to take as many expense cuts as we can. Moving into that area, our personal services are pretty flat. We did reduce by one, but we've also seen some increases in benefits and COLAs and so forth. On materials and services, we took a reduction this year. Part of that, if you notice, we went from 2021, 6.7 million to 21-22, 9 million. Part of that is the non-capital aspect of the reserves that we spent to build up our network. We also had, as we moved into new technologies for things like our Microsoft Cloud services, our spam filters, our web filters, our video conferencing and so forth. When we move to new technology, it requires us to actually carry contracts for the support of both the old technology and the new technology as we migrate. Well, we had to pay both those contracts and all those different services this last year. But moving into the new year, we're able to drop the old contracts. That allows us to take a reduction in our materials and services. Unfortunately, it's a one-time only because now we won't be able to see that savings as a reduction carried on the new year's. We'll just be paying for the new services. The other thing you'll notice is the capital outline. The capital outlay has gone down. Again, that's because of large things like our network switches and so forth. We're paid this year. They're all installed and running. We have a little bit of encumbrance moving into next year as we're waiting for delivery of some of the services to show up, mainly due to supply chain problems. Those, though, we expect will be covered through the beginning balance that hasn't been paid yet for those capital replacements this year will be paid for in next year. So it's not an increase in budget, it's just moving some of it through by beginning balance in the next year to complete all those upgrades. Then we'll be getting back into the save up mode for the next round of replacements. And that covers pretty much the primary fund. On page 9 is our Cbx Fund. It's actually fairly flat if we don't consider ARPA. The other non-ARPA construction went down a little bit this year. You'll notice that our beginning balance went from 373,000 to 100,000 estimated. That's pretty much because we haven't done as much in new construction that we're paying for. We're still doing a lot of new construction that ARPA or our customers are paying for, where they pay for our construction, we bill it back, then we take care of the fiber plant for them. But the new construction that we're funding has not gone up this much. You see this year, we actually gone down a little bit. Also, we've gone down is our capital outlay. Again, we built a lot of our own fiber last year and the year before. This year, we're not doing as much, mainly because we're concentrating on projects for customers and ARPA. The good thing, though, that's also helped in our materials and services and a little bit on personnel is we're doing more and more ourselves. We own our own trucks now. We're mostly doing our own staff. Our staff count went from only 2 people a few years ago now to 6. We've finally been able to recruit and fill those positions. We only have 1 position left to fill. And that allows us to do everything a lot cheaper, a lot better than going out for contracts. Also means that we can be a little bit quicker on repair and on services. Overall, though, our cost for this year have gone down a little bit, except in personnel, we're fully funded. The last fund I'll cover real quick is our fund. This year, we were lucky to get the 2.5 million out of the first round of payments from ARPA that allow us to start with our phase 1 of the Cbx build out. We've achieved services already on that. We have people that already are connected via our ISP partners, those partners that we work with that are actually providing the services. We're doing all the infrastructure to build and support. We actually have customers on and running now, and we're hoping to hit several hundred here pretty soon and several thousand by next year. Our goal right now is to complete phase 1 next year. Since we started this year, we're still in the building process. So out of that 2.5 million, you'll see there's 1.5 million we're rolling into next year. So that's where the beginning balance becomes available for us for next year. But our federal grant money goes from 2.5 to 0. We're hoping next year when we start working on phase 2 and identify phase 3, the remaining identified funds, which is right now targeted at 7.6, which can be spread out over several years, we'll start seeing those funds roll in to allow us to continue with the building. And we'll have to do a supplemental to move those fundings into the federal subsidy in here. But right now, we're operating on what we had from this 2.5 this year. That actually covers the basics, so I can go over any questions. I did want to do a call out to budget and finance for all their great help in helping us get this prepared this year and all their support.
Thank
there are no
you.
questions.
Looking around the room, I do not see anyone posing questions. Okay, good. But I especially want to thank you for presenting today, even though we know you don't feel well, and sorry that we couldn't have you here in person. But I hope that all goes well with you, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Dave. Hope you feel better. I can only imagine.
It's got to be miserable.
How wishing that is. Question: because the budget materials aren't designed to show this, and I kind of referenced this before with other departments. Can you just tell me, in your industry, with your purchases of equipment and all the things that your department buys, phones, computers, and so forth, are you seeing an increase in cost and supply chain challenges?
And we're seeing a lot of problems. Even though we build back to departments, we buy almost all the equipment for the departments, including PCs, and we've seen across the board increases. We're also seeing across the board delays that have other impacts on the departments. I mean, we're starting to see some of the equipment come in faster, like laptops, but other things can go on delay for months, and that forces us sometimes to have to buy from other vendors or other materials that we would not have normally bought because they're more expensive, but we can't wait. Fiber costs are going up. Luckily, finance has been working really well with us on allowing us to buy fiber up front. So we kind of perceived that was going to happen. So we've got a good supply of fiber coming in. But in other areas, we're seeing a lot of things either being delayed or costs going up all over. What we're seeing a big increase actually is in what we call subscription cost. When you go to like cloud services, you save on not having to buy infrastructure cost because you don't need the servers, you don't need other things. You still need a network, but you don't need a lot of the servers or staff to support those. But those subscription costs now are being charged by the cloud services, and they're taking full advantage of that because you can't really go back. So we're trying to keep an eye out for where's the best way to go to the cloud or not to the cloud based on where those costs are going in the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. Can you just put just a rough range of the increase, 10%, 20%? I mean, what do you think it looks like?
I need to turn to our purchasing side on that. I know that on some of the servers and some of the laptops, I know we've seen 5 to 10% easy. And then they get into their issues, like Lenovo got into an issue where they couldn't get chips. So their cost of chips went up, and of course that cost gets passed on. So some of it goes up and down, where when they start getting chips coming in, the costs come back down. Overall, as an average, I could find out though and get back to you on that.
I got about 25 other questions, but you know what? Your voice isn't doing so well, so I'll just
Thank
focus on
you,
that today.
Commissioner Savas. Yeah, thanks very much, Dave. I think that's it for you for today, so please go take care of yourself.
I do apologize. It just hit the wrong time, I tell you.
You're good. You're good. All right, thank you very much.